Happy Major Championship Week, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into another edition of Burke's Beat. That's right, we've got golf's third major championship happening this week, which means we've got our guy Brady Kannon joining the program, one of the best golf handicappers I know. He's been making us money throughout these major championships, and you better believe he is fired up and ready to go for the U.S. Open at Pinehurst course number 2. So we'll get into that momentarily with Brady. Naturally, he's going to break down the alterations to the course over the years, what makes it so difficult, what specific categories, metrically speaking, you should keep an eye out for when you're trying to label which golfers to bet on. And then obviously his best bets when it comes to outright wins, top 20s, head-to-head matchups, and much, much more, breaking down the third major of the PGA season. But before we get into Brady, let me remind you that you can follow along for myself on Twitter at Danny Burke 5 and the website, burksbeat.com. And if you subscribe to the website, you get notified when I'm dishing out articles, which is happening on a daily basis. Been trying out something a little new, going more in-depth with my Major League Baseball previews over the past couple weeks, and I've been calling it Burke's Beat MLB Handicapping Handbook for whichever respective day it's on. And basically what it provides is a weather report, which games will be impacted severely by weather, if any. The biggest line moves throughout the sharp sports books across the board so you can understand where the sharp money is. If you're aligned with that, how much you want to take that into account is completely up to you, but it's something that I throw out there. And then furthermore, I'm doing pitching projections. Players that may be a little bit undervalued and may be expected to perform better. Who's going to be on the rise? Those are some guys that I note. Conversely, which pitchers are overrated or expected to regress coming up? Pitchers due to be on the decline. Those are other categories that I get into. And of course, best bets every single day. So make sure you check that out on the website. Again, that's burksbeat.com. All right, enough blabbering from me. You came here to listen to our guy, Mr. Kannon, so let's get his breakdown of the U.S. Open over at Pinehurst. And now it's time to welcome in one of our favorite guests on Burke's Beat, and that is none other than Brady Kannon making another return to the podcast. Of course, that means another major championship is underway throughout the PGA Tour, and that would be the U.S. Open at Pinehurst, course number 2 out in North Carolina. Folks, Brady Kannon on Twitter at Las Vegas Golfer. He's a host on Sports Grid, and he writes all of his betting tips and advice for golf.com. Like I always say, one of the best in the biz. He nailed it with Xander when we were talking about the PGA Championship. So we're excited to hear what he's got ready to fire off for this weekend. Brady, thank you as always, my friend. How are we feeling heading into the third major of this tour year?
I tell you what, first of all, Danny, thank you for having me. As always, a nice little tradition we have going here, doing a preview of every major championship. But second of all, to answer your question, I'm feeling, I think, more comfortable maybe than I have. I don't know. I feel more comfortable, I guess, than usual for this particular major. And we can certainly get into why. But, it's always... It's like betting the Super Bowl or the playoffs or the Kentucky Derby. It's a big event, the biggest in the sport. And you come around to the Masters and you're like so jonesing for Augusta in the springtime and the drama that tournament has. And, the board has been up to bet that tournament for 10 months and you've got all these futures and everything. And then the PGA rolled around and, we took a shot with Xander, coming off of a couple of brutal losses when he couldn't hold the 54-hole lead. And then that just worked out beautifully. So happy for him. We really nailed that tournament, and I was glad to see him get a win, kind of get that monkey off of his back. And now we have another biggie, and, there's always doubt and, gosh, do I need to add this guy? And what about this? You kind of second guess yourself and stuff like that. But I tell you what, I feel pretty good about this one.
Well, that's what we love to hear, Brady. Always good to get the mojo flowing when we head into one of the bigger tournaments of the season. And of course, one of the more entertaining and I guess you could say grueling tournaments, right? I mean, the way they set up the US Open is always challenging. And if you've been on Twitter or X, obviously, as it's called now, there's been a lot of videos of people just dropping their golf balls on the greens and it just completely rolling off. Explain the setup for this course for a lot of people who may not be as familiar and some of the changes they've made over the years to kind of add to that difficulty.
Yeah, first of all, that's become kind of a fun tradition on Twitter as well. Is guys dropping balls into the rough and you can't see it because it's 6 inches deep or whatever, and in this case, guys, chipping balls onto the green and whatever, and everything's rolling off. That's certainly reflective of what we can expect in a small part anyway. But no, I mean, the way these pictures look, some of them look like it would be impossible to play there. So I would take those with a grain of salt. The fairways are actually pretty darn wide. This is Pinehurst #2 in North Carolina. The Pinehurst Golf Resort is maybe the most famous in all of America. Just an absolutely iconic uh, property. 9 18-hole courses at Pinehurst. This is #2. They just go by number. Pinehurst #1, #3, #4. This is Pinehurst #2, and is certainly the utmost candidate of the 9 for major championship golf. I believe this will be the 4th time that has hosted a U.S. Open. The fairways, like I say, are actually pretty wide. And you talked about some of the changes. Donald Ross, who is one of the most famous golf designers in the history of the game, built this course in 1907. And he called it his finest masterpiece and the fairest test of major championship golf. Um, Ross, has some characteristics that make up a lot of what he does with a golf course. Certainly, the closely mown, shaved runoff areas around the greens, and that's going to be a popular topic of discussion this week, leading up to the U.S. Open, and certainly Pinehurst, has a number of examples of that characteristic. You'll hear the term turtle back, like the shape of a turtle's back, a crown or a domed shape. That's what the greens basically are out here. And you're seeing those pictures of the balls rolling off the greens. That's because the shape of these, the dome type contour to these greens, will tend to repel shots that are not landing in the proper spot. But Core and Crenshaw, I think it's Bill Core and Ben Crenshaw. Ben Crenshaw, of course, the famous golfer and one-time or two-time Masters winner, I believe. They have a team that is responsible for a number of designs and also redesigns. Now, they were brought into Pinehurst in 2011. They didn't necessarily redesign the place, but they cleaned it up and brought it back to what Donald Ross originally intended, over 100 years ago. And that is the wide fairways with virtually no rough. And what you have bordering most of the fairways is either, pine trees and pine needles, pine straw, or these sand waste areas. It looks like a big beach going across the fairway or beside the fairway, with a lot of native grasses and wiregrass in these sand waste areas. And so, really what you have is just an awesome golf course that, prior to this renovation had probably gotten away from, overgrowth and over the years and all that type of thing that happens to any sort of property. It just needed to be scaled back and brought back to life by Corin Crenshaw. And I think, every job at any course we've seen these guys perform has been an awesome one. So I think you're going to see an incredible golf course once again this week. Very difficult course. It is over 7,500 yards, roughly 7,550 in yards, and it's a par 70. Now, just to give you a little bit of reference, last week was the Memorial, Jack Nicklaus's place in Dublin, Ohio. That tournament played as the most difficult golf course we have seen yet this year other than the Masters. So second most difficult tournament we have seen yet this year. That course was like 75, 88 in yards. It was about 40 or 50 yards longer than Pinehurst. But the Memorial was a par 72. So Pinehurst is about the same length and they're giving you two less shots. That's really hard and plays that much longer. So what you're going to see out there is these sand waste areas, the native grasses. It kind of has really a links-ish feel to it. You have to play from the ground quite a bit. You know, typical American golf style is to bomb it as far as you can and attack from the air. A links style is more, doing damage on the ground, around the greens, putting, using the old Texas wedge, sometimes putting your ball from off the green, bump and runs, and, playing a lot lower to the surface than the aerial assault. What you'll find in these fairways, I mentioned they're pretty wide. I don't think you're going to have too much trouble hitting them. Even some of the most inaccurate players will be able to find these fairways probably more often than not. It's just going to be a matter of good or bad luck if you miss the fairway, what kind of lie you get in the pine straw or the waste areas. You might find yourself right behind a clump of native grass or something, or you might find yourself, on a little tuft of pine straw that's perfectly, non-penalizing. So, but when you're in the fairway, it gets really tricky where finding the fairway I mentioned is not extremely difficult, but finding the right spots in the fairways can be plenty challenging. If you find the fairway in the wrong spot, you can end up with an uneven lie, a ball way above your feet or a weird angle into a very difficult green. So there are going to be the proper positions in the fairway to find, and that will take certainly some accuracy off the tee. It's kind of funny. I was talking to a friend who's played here close to half a dozen times, Danny, for a little bit of intel on the golf course. And, he said of all the 9 courses at Pinehurst, he would recommend your typical resort player play half a dozen others rather than number 2. It's a relatively boring, very difficult, exhausting 18 holes, and boring in the sense that there's only one hole with water. There's not a ton of elevation change. It's basically flat. There's not a lot of wow factor, It's just really hard, the ultimate grinder golf course where you've got to find the right spots in the fairways, the right spots in the green. And then if you miss the green, as you refer to on social media, you have to be a magician to get up and down from these tight lies around the putting surfaces.
So, with the way that you describe this course, Brady, and obviously I know you take a lot of these categories into account, and maybe there's not one specifically, maybe there's a few, but what would you really hold to the highest degree when evaluating some of these players? For example, like driving accuracy, as you did mention, strokes gained approach, scrambling, those type of categories that, again, as we try to explain to maybe more nuanced golf handicappers, what would you recommend that people look at, or at least what are some of the top ones you considered for this specific setting?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Danny. And I think when you dumb it down, it comes down to total driving, which is a measurement that is a combination of driving accuracy and driving distance. So you want to be long and straight. And that plays into what I'm talking about these fairways. They're relatively wide. They're not, you don't have to have necessarily accuracy to hit them, but you've got to have accuracy to find the right spots. And then, of course, you have to be long enough as well, because I talked about how long this golf course is. It's not only long at over 7,500 yards, it's also a par 70. So that plays additionally long. So long and straight off the tee. You need to hit greens in regulation. And that means, on a par 5, you're hitting the green in 3 shots. On a par 3, you're hitting it in 1 shot, So hitting greens in regulation, and that is basically an old school stat for strokes gained approach, iron play. Okay, if we're going to simplify it even further, it's iron play. You need to be great with your irons and accurate. And then finally, like I say, when you miss these greens in regulation, because that's going to happen, you're going to have to be an absolute magician around the greens with the short game. And you're going to see a number of different styles or approaches around the greens this week when trying to get up and down, because Donald Ross, this design, it begs you to be creative. And you're going to see guys chipping the ball with long irons, with 3-woods, with hybrids, with wedges. You're going to see guys putting the ball from off the surface. There's going to be all different methods to trying to figure out these tight lies around the greens and getting your ball up and into the hole. So, again, if you want to just emphasize 3 areas, total driving, strokes gained approach, and scrambling. You do all those things well, and you ought to have a pretty good U.S. Open player this week.
All right, good deal, Brady. Let's go ahead and move on to previewing some of these specific players, and we'd be fools not to begin with the best in the game right now, Mr. Scotty Scheffler. So, Brady, I was reading your article. And by the way, everybody, again, it's on Brady's Twitter at Las Vegas Golfer. It's at golf.com, his write-up, if you want more of just the perspective of seeing it written down with his analysis. And, of course, with Scotty Scheffler in mind, you and I have talked about him in the past in the sense of we strayed away from betting in pre-flop because of the lack of value, right? But we've gotten to the point, Brady, where this man is just so dominant that it's almost like you have to take a little piece of it, it feels, right? And the way you and I had talked about it for the prior 2 majors is, all right, not that we're trying to avoid a pre-flop, but let's just wait till we get to maybe Saturday and see if, 1, you either get a better number, or 2, you don't have to invest at the price right now and you can see it play out and get a little bit more conviction in him. But it seems like you are getting into him pre-flop, and I know you got a better price because you're always on top of this, weeks, months before. But you're recommending it. I see about plus 333 best number right now, but anywhere in that 3-1 or better range, you think is worth a flyer on Scheffler. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do. Danny, I told you at the top of the show here that I'm feeling better, maybe, a little bit more confident than usual this week. And that's because I'm on Scotty. I am all in on Scotty. This guy is just unbelievable. I have made this comparison before, and I think as bettors, it is something we need to take advantage of. It's like betting Floyd Mayweather in boxing. Scotty Scheffler doesn't lose. I mean, it's extremely rare that he loses, and especially when you have a major championship that is this difficult. He is by far the best player in the world. What he's doing is Tiger Woods-esque. He has won 5 times in his last 8 starts. And by the way, the worst finish over that course of 8 starts was 8th, when all he did on Friday morning that week was get arrested. I mean, you had to send this guy to jail to keep him from winning. That 8 tournament stretch went first, second, first, 8th, second, first. It's unreal. And yeah, is plus 330, plus, 3-1, plus 350. Does that number still present value? Not really. I was able to get plus 450 a while back. I think it was right after the PGA. And then as he was carrying on about his business at the Memorial last weekend, I was still able to find 4-1. So I double dipped and went back and got more. 4-1's probably a very fair number, and less than that, you're paying a premium. But would you rather have a ticket on a guy at 80-1 that doesn't win, or would you rather have a ticket on a guy at
Right.
3-1 that does win? So, and that's not always the best formula here in betting. You absolutely want to get the best price, just as if you were going to the grocery store. You don't want to overpay. However, the special on steak this week at the grocery store is unavoidable, and I think that's the same thing here. It is my firm belief that he's going to win. So I'm going to be on Scotty. I am on Scotty, and yeah, he is just remarkable, Danny. I mean, you crunch all the stats, and he's number 1 in the field in almost everything. Um, and I remember back in the day when I was watching Tiger do this type of stuff, and I used to hate it because I was like, gosh, there's no drama. These are not
Right.
fun tournaments to watch. It's over already. And, where's Mickelson, and where's David Duval, and where's, Sergio and Ernie Els. And, these guys are fantastic players. It didn't matter. And I've kind of taken a real liking to Scotty ever since that arrest, and he's come out in the public and given his story on that, which I thought he handled incredibly well. He did a eulogy for Grayson Murray before the memorial and did that unscripted and nailed it incredibly well. The more we hear from this guy, who, at one point, even just a few months ago, was kind of vanilla and a little bit boring, and the tournament's already over halfway through, and all he does is hit greens and go on to the next hole, and if he makes a bogey, he comes right back and makes a birdie, and it was a little bit mundane. But as I've gotten to learn a little bit more about this guy, because he's been thrust more so into the public spotlight, I've really, really come to like him and appreciate how smart he is at this game. I think he's got a better mental game than anybody on tour or the live or wherever they come from here to Pinehurst. I think he's obviously got a better physical game than everybody. And, I mentioned those three areas, the crucial areas: total driving, strokes gained approach, and scrambling. Well, guess what? He's basically number one in every category. He's sixth in total driving. He's number one in approach, and he's fourth in scrambling. So you telling me this isn't a perfect golf course for Scotty Scheffler? I think he wins it again, Danny. And if that's boring, then put some money on him. That'll make it a little more fun.
Right, exactly. If you can't beat them, join them, right? And in hindsight, when you're looking back, hey, if you're hitting a 3-1 ticket and you're making money, it's all that matters, right? What kind of profit are you making? Even if it's not the longest shot or in the double-digit realm, hey, if Scotty's winning and if you can make some coin off of it, then find a way to get involved, because he has been an absolute beast. And like you mentioned, Brady could set up perfectly once again here at Pinehurst, course number 2. Speaking of number 2, though, someone who could come behind Scheffler once again, and I know you write about him, and it's someone that stood out to me while looking at some of these odds and just kind of all these stats and metrics, and that being Colin Morikawa. And right now, the best price I see on him is about 16-1 at a couple different outlets here in my jurisdiction of the state of Illinois. And I also am taking a stab on him at top 20 price of minus 120. Oh, pardon me, actually, Circa did have plus 1750. A couple other books, if you don't have Circa, had 16-1. But you talk about driving accuracy, Colin's right there at the top. Obviously, his last 6 tournaments, he's been great, 16th or better in each, in top 5 in 4 out of 6 of those, including both of the majors. So explain a little bit deeper than I have why this could set up nicely for someone like Morikawa as well.
Yeah, I think Morikawa is the front runner for second place. And it kind of speaks to what kind of run Scotty is on right now, that we now have an abundance of markets available, Danny, where you can bet without Scotty Scheffler. Like, who do you think's going to do this without Scotty Scheffler? Who do you think's going to win? Who do you think's going to win this nationality market, best American player, whatever. They have, I mean, it's like Larry Bird asking everybody who's going to finish second at the 3-point contest. They have actual betting markets that eliminate Scotty and just take your pick from there. And I think, in my mind, Morikawa has been the biggest threat to Scheffler in the last couple months, ever since the Masters. It was kind of Wyndham Clark, the bridesmaid, that was at Bay Hill and at the Players Championship. And lately it's become Morikawa. He finished third at the Masters. He was runner-up last week at the Memorial, only lost by a shot. And you talked about Morikawa's driving accuracy, also his iron play. Those have been probably his biggest strengths ever since he hit the tour. We're talking about a 2-time major winner here as well in Colin Morikawa. That's the same number Scotty has. This guy is obviously no joke. But what's really come around has been the short game, and it blew me away at Augusta, the way he was able to chip and putt. And that's something he really has not had in his arsenal at a high level until now. So now that he's got that going, and again, that fits the formula, what we're looking for, good driving, accurate driving. He's got enough length as well. He's not the longest guy in the world, but he's got plenty of length, in my opinion. I mean, we saw what he did at Valhalla at the PGA Championship, a monster long golf course. And he was there in the lead going into Sunday in the final round. And then now he's added the scrambling and the short game aspect as well. So, yeah, Morikawa made my list. I also played Ludwig Oberg, and I got Morikawa at 20. I saw him at 18, and you're right. He kind of keeps coming down. He's a popular pick this week, and we don't always like to be on the popular guys, but I think there's a lot of people out there trying to find somebody that can beat Scotty. And yeah, Morikawa is a good choice. I don't know if it's going to happen. You know my position about Scotty, but you know, I played Morikawa. This was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. I played Oberg maybe just about a week ago or so. Played Tommy Fleetwood as another guy a few weeks ago at 40-1. Because again, all of those guys check the boxes of what I think are the most important criteria: the total driving, the approach game, and the scrambling. They all do it incredibly well. Oberg, the young phenom, we saw him at Augusta. That's really kind of where he burst on the scene for the general public to witness his greatness. He's actually played this course before in 2019 at the U.S. Amateur, so he has experience playing Pinehurst number 2. Tommy Fleetwood's been in excellent form. He's a great scrambler. He's great with the irons, and he's great in total driving. His best majors, and this is kind of an interesting angle, the best finishes in majors for Tommy Fleetwood have come at the U.S. Open and the British Open. And Pinehurst, like we talked about, playing on the ground and that link-style feel, it's almost a combination of a British Open course and a U.S. Open. So why not Tommy Fleetwood? If he plays at both of those events and those style of major championships very well, why not one that's a mix of the two? So, again, while I'm heavily invested in Scheffler, I think as a support team, if you will, Oberg, Morikawa, and Fleetwood are awfully good.
All right, and then how about some of these longer shots too, Brady, once you get near the triple digits, if they're even still available, but just something to maybe throw a little bit of pizza money on. And I know, like you always do, if you're betting these guys to win outright, you're usually taking a piece of them to end up in the top 20 realm as well. So you can get maybe a little bit of a hedge in a sense and still hopefully cash on them. But who are some players that crack your list for the really long shots for this tourney?
Yeah, I did not play Scheffler for a top 5, but I don't mind that bet either. Like you say, as a little bit of an insurance policy. I did play Morikawa, Fleetwood, and Oberg for a top 20 finish as well. And then with these next two guys, yes, I sprinkled a little bit on an outright and also played them top 20. And that's Alex Noren and Billy Horschel. I've been very impressed with both of these guys for a few weeks, if not a few months now. And I found Noren. I was sitting there in bed a few nights ago and I saw him at 150-1. I said, boy, that looks long. He's down to about 100. You might find 125. So that was, and again, I'm not real concerned about the number here at this point with these guys. I mean, you don't want to obviously pay too low. You want certainly at least triple digits. But if Billy Horschel or Alex Noren was going to win the U.S. Open, that would certainly be very much of a surprise result. Now, are they going to play well? Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked by a top 10. I would not be shocked at all by a top 20, and that's really where my bet resides. I found Billy Horschel at a ridiculous number of 225-1, and he quickly has been bet down to 150 or so. I wasn't the only one that thought that one was a little off. But again, I'm not just trying to say don't bet it if these numbers that are long gone. I'm not going to be that guy. If you're getting 100 to 150-1 and you sprinkle a couple bucks on the guy, great. But yeah, maybe you want to be a little bit more aggressive with your top 20 finish or a top 30 finish or a top 40, whichever way you want to go about it. But once again, these guys check all my boxes, my funnel, my filter, if you will. I looked at a number of different things, but the ultimate filter was the total driving, the approach, and the scrambling. Noren's number 1 on tour in scrambling. He's 26th on approach, and he's a pretty darn accurate driver of the golf ball, has enough length. Same with Horschel, and they both had remarkable 2024 campaigns. Alex Noren has finished top 25 in 9 of his last 10 starts, and some have been top 10. He is knocking on the door. He also has a great deal of links golf experience. He's won 11 times in Europe and worldwide. So he knows how to get it done on the ground. Billy Horschel has had good finishes overseas. He just won in the Dominican Republic a couple months ago on the PGA Tour. He finished 8th at the PGA Championship and 15th last week at Memorial. So, not only is the form, or not only are these guys checking all the boxes I've talked about, but they're also each one of them in really good form. Oberg was one of only 11 guys that finished under par last week at the Memorial. And I think that speaks to how good he is. I mean, we talked about Scheffler, on an extremely difficult golf course was still better than everybody else. Well, Oberg was better than almost everybody else. So, yeah, current form, the three main categories that I looked at, Scheffler, Morikawa, Fleetwood, Oberg, and then Noren and Horschel for a couple of longer bombs. Like I say, I played all of the guys for a top 20, except for Scheffler. If you're going to play him for a finish position, I would probably play top 5. Top 10, I saw at like minus 250, which is, yeah, probably a winner, but that's a lot of money to lay. So I'd probably go top 5, which I think you can find at minus 150 or less.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's pretty much the card, Danny. I did have one head-to-head matchup if you want to get into that as well.
Yeah, hey, if you got a couple minutes to spare, we'd love to hear it, man, and then we'll get you out of here. I know you got a busy schedule, so why don't you lay it on us, and then we'll send you on your way.
Yeah, head-to-head matchup. I went off the map here. Did not play any of the guys that I have an outright for or a top 20 or anything like that. I played Xander Schauffele at minus 120 over Rory McIlroy. And you can probably find this matchup at just about any book out there because obviously it's a couple of the most high-profile players in the tournament, in a couple of the most high-profile players in the world. So you ought to be able to find it. I was able to find minus 120. One friend told me that he saw minus 130. I would say anything less than minus 130. 130 is probably not bad, but less than that is certainly even better. And 120, I think, is really good. The only reason I'm probably not on Xander has an incredible skill set, does everything we've talked about at a high level. He's probably the second best player in the world next to Scottie Scheffler. The only reason I'm not on him for an outright, and, had I not gone back to the well and added more Scottie, maybe I would have added Xander. But what's keeping me off of him is it's very unlikely that a guy's going to win a major championship back to back. I think there's a chance that he gets up to that first tee on Thursday and there's a little bit of nerves and he knows what he's just accomplished in the last month. And last month at Valhalla, he was so determined. I'm not sure if there's the same emotion and intensity going into this next one after he's got a trophy now on his mantle. Now, he plays 9 holes and next thing you know, he's back in the groove. And Xander Schauffele is a top 10 machine. Before he won last month at the PGA, all he did was finish top 10 like clockwork. And I would expect it again. I don't know if the golf course is perfect for Rory McIlroy. Rory McIlroy's best weapon is his driver and his length off the tee. And I don't think, if Rory drives it long and straight all week, that's going to be a huge help. I don't know if scrambling is his best skill set. I don't think putting is his best skill set. His irons are a tremendous weapon, but sometimes they can go sideways. His wedges sometimes can. So, I said this last week when we were watching the Memorial. I think there's really only 2 guys in the world right now that could beat Scottie Scheffler with their A game, and that's Rory and Xander. I don't know if this course is best suited for Rory to find his A game. And for Xander, I think it's perfect. So, like I say, the only reason I'm not on Xander in any other form or fashion is because I don't think he can win majors back to back. But I'll take him head to head over Rory.
All right, I dig it, my man. Brady Kannon, folks, at Las Vegas Golfer on the tweets, host over at Sports Grid, betting content written up on a weekly basis over at golf.com. And Brady, I'm sure you'll have more material throughout the major halfway through the weekend, so we'll be sure to keep our eyes peeled for that. Very much appreciate the time and the quality information as always. I love that you're feeling great about this tournament. Helps all of us feel great. And I know you've made us a lot of money along the way. So, again, thank you very much, Brady, and enjoy the third major of the year.
You bet, man. Thanks for having me as always, and let's cast some tickets, my friend.
And there you have it, everybody. Brady Kannon breaking down golf's third major championship of the year. Should be setting up for a very, very entertaining and exciting tournament this upcoming weekend. And hopefully we can cash some winners along the way. And I know I repeat it a lot, but look, I'm just saying, I implore you to follow the guy on Twitter at Las Vegas Golfer, because he's not only covering the major championships, he's doing every single tournament every single week. And not only does he do it before the tournament begins, as I mentioned already, he does updates when we head into the weekend post-cut. So then you can get some adjustments. You can maybe look to hedge off of some of your plays, see if there's any updates for some other guys to consider along the way. Brady's got you covered. And not only does the man do golf, he's doing baseball. He's a former Super Contest champion when it comes to handicapping the NFL. Very prestigious award. So, again, just one of the sharpest minds in the business, and can't thank him enough for always sparing some time to talk a little shop. But before we get out of here, one last reminder as well. Check out BurkeSpeed.com. You can get my baseball breakdowns on a daily basis. You can subscribe. Just put in your email. You get notified when new articles are released. If you don't want to do that, well, you can always follow on Twitter at Danny Burke 5. Always appreciate if you like and subscribe to the podcast. Apple and Spotify also helps you get notified when new episodes are released. Regardless of what you end up doing, if you're saying, Danny, shut up, let's get out of here, that works too, my friend. So just want to say thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you have a profitable weekend, and we'll catch up again soon. Best of luck to everybody out there, and take care.